the agency, if you want me to give you an overview or talk about it, I would tell you this. I think that MPD and the other first responders in this community is the most resilient community I've ever heard of, experienced, been a part of. What they're doing with what they have is unprecedented. And the fact that we've got other partners coming in and saying, how can we help, and stand shoulder to shoulder and be with us in our most critical time, and realize we have people that haven't even entered the grieving phase. They haven't even had that chance. And so we know that there's all these things going on, but we're still handling calls for service. We still go out and have to make sure that we're fighting crime and making sure that we're doing our duty in addition to all these other things, and we haven't stopped.
On that topic of August 8th, there was discussion about the communications. You said that there was cell service loss, a lot of factors that played a role. Was there constant communication with the Emergency Operating Center about what police were seeing and experiencing on the ground?
So our radios worked that night. Our radios did not fail, and so we had constant radio communication that night, and we had law enforcement MPD representatives in the EOC from earlier that day. I believe from the very early hours, approximately 4 o'clock in the morning on the 8th, we had, when the partial activation started, we had MPD representation there.
At any point, did the pace of the fire outrun the department's ability to maintain order amid the chaos? And at any point, did police have to flee to save their own lives like some of the firefighters had reported?
I think the pace of that fire outran anyone's expectation alive that has ever thought what a fire could do or what a wildfire could do. How many fires has the state or the county had that we're aware of? I don't even know. I can't even imagine that, but nobody expected this. And I think when you add in 3 fires and 80-mile-an-hour winds and all the things that we know we talk about, so I don't think you can say anybody could have expected in any way the speed and the destructive force that this was. I've said before, man versus nature, nature always wins. But the department, I know I had guys that they were very concerned that they were not coming home that night. I know that there were people that they thought they were trapped, they were pinned in because of the utility poles that were down on the ground. They were blocking them in, and you can't just drive over those. And so as the fire's coming in and the heat's coming in, and we have just begun to begin our process of our after action, but realize it's an after action, and we're still very much in the action of our identifications and our notifications, as well as our other police functions that we do. But I would tell you that I do know the story about the firefighters and using the police vehicle in order to get them out. I do know the story of our officers going up and down the streets with the sirens and knocking on doors. I do know that I have an officer that came and went into the coffee bean and actually got people who were sheltered in place, and had that officer not done that, they would have died. And so those are the things that I'm aware of. I also am aware of an officer that was blocking traffic going into the affected area in Lahaina from the bypass, and making sure that people didn't go into harm's way. And he was looking down, and his house is off Lahaina Luna, and he could not reach his family. And he looked at all the obstacles on Lahaina Luna, knowing nobody could go that way because it was impossible to pass from what he saw. And here's a guy, you want to talk about something, here's a guy that manned his post, not even knowing if his own family was alive. And so when we criticize and we sit there and we talk about what people could have, should have, would have done, that's not what we need to do. What we need to do is we need to make sure that we're doing everything to protect our community right now, because our community still very much needs all the help, all the support, and all the love that everyone can provide. And when we have outside forces that aren't a part of this area that are preying on our people, that's wrong. Our people, not just MPD, not just MFD, not just our doctors, our people are heroes, and God bless them.
Okay. Moving on into the investigative aspect of the incident. Earlier this week you mentioned the planned release of a credible list of unaccounted for individuals. Can you share a little bit of the details about the document and the progress made towards narrowing that list?
So every week, the FBI will be putting out a credible list. And that is, it's very simple criteria right now, which is a first and last name and a human source that provided it. That's very broad. We're going to need to start narrowing that down, but that'll be the process each week. We'll be releasing that. But what we're going to do is add this week the ones that are also the MPD missing persons reports into that list, so that we make sure that we have everything in that credible report that we know are credible, unaccounted for. And the desire will be, if you know that somebody on that list is safe, please contact the FBI. They're actually standing up a complete phone bank with analysts dedicated directly to this. I know they cleared off several from the 388 last week, but we're going to be adding names onto it this week from the different sources. The desire will be, we'll maintain that each week. We'll have an update where we release the names, and we'll put an asterisk on there if they're on an MPD police report. We're going to put an M on there if they're a minor. But they need to do the police report, because a simple first and last name really, that's all it is. We have to have a report. Why? We need to know where people lived. We need to know their physical descriptors. We need to know as much contact as we possibly can, because we have to identify folks. We have to do an investigation. And a first and last name is not enough. We need those reports. And so we'll build a process out to do that, but the process for the immediate future, for the next several weeks, will be each Friday we'll be updating that list, updating those names, so that we can eventually narrow it down. And then whatever that will be, we can have a much more drilled down drive, if you will, to then get those names into those police reports, because eventually only the MPD police reports will be what we'll be going with.
Along those same lines, is there any kind of reverse lists or tallies taking place? Like, for example, the Department of Education has so many people that are not enrolled yet from the Lahaina schools. Are you guys looking at lists like those and integrating them?
We're looking really at every list, but yes, we are. We're also looking at lists for people that didn't show up for work. And so, and I know we're going to be making some notifications based on that, you know, as this progresses, because any of the data dumps that we can get coming into the FBI and the department to process what that credible list is, we're looking at that, which is why I can tell you this, the FBI has cleared, found, or identified to be alive well over 3,000 people. And so think about this. You had people just putting themselves on a list. And I'll give you a story. We had somebody say, oh, I haven't spoken to somebody in 10 years, and I think they might have been in that area, so go ahead and add them on the list. The person was fine. My own assistant has had her number called twice. So the reason I say that is, that's not helping. If folks have a legitimate person that they cannot find, please fill out a missing person report. But we don't need people to simply add a name on there, because that's taking valuable time from us doing the job that we need to do, and that's right now identifying those that we've recovered. And so that's why we want to build a process, which we've started now, and later today I'll be releasing that second week's list. But we had to build that process, and that process didn't exist before.
Can you provide greater clarity on how many remains were recovered from the Front Street or waterfront area? And does this tally make up the majority of the people that were found, of the 115 identified?
So we have GPS coordinates and locations for everybody else, where everybody's been found. But this is still ongoing, and I have a whole bunch of folks right now that have not been notified. And so for me to put that map up and say this is where we found him would cause a lot of grief and a lot of hurt right now, because we have not yet even been able to identify some of these folks. And just because, and just hear me out, somebody might have been found in or around a house doesn't mean it was their house. They might have run into it. And so it would be very premature and unethical for me right now at this point, while we're still doing the investigations, to say exactly where everybody was in fact found. The family members that have been notified are told where their loved ones were found, so they do have that. But just think about it this way, I also have to have the ability to discern who these individuals are. And if we prematurely put some of that information out because we're using that in our validation, it would cause us some issue. When it's all done and the after action is there, we will plot where everybody was recovered, but that'll be when it's concluded and it's appropriate to do so.
What is the process for declaring someone as presumed deceased, and will this number outpace the number of individuals that you have already found remains for?
It's a fair question. It's a very premature question. We've had those conversations, but in order to get that, we have to do everything we can to figure out what we're in fact dealing with as far as the number of the remains that we have. And so we know that's 115. And that's why those missing persons reports are imperative. Because if there is not a missing persons report, that other thing of a presumption will not take place. And so we have to have the proper documentation. I will tell you this, I've been speaking with folks from around the country, but particularly the sheriff that was in charge of the campfire. And they had 1,300 that were missing, and they had in the 80s the number that would be dead. And so they took the 1,300 and they actually recovered everybody that was unaccounted for. But it takes time, and it's not something that's going to happen overnight. So before we have the discussions where we're actually doing the presumptions, we've got a lot of work still to do as far as with what we're dealing with, as far as the folks that we have recovered and getting the information on those missing person reports. And I would make a plea that the DNA, if you have a loved one that is unaccounted for, do the DNA. Get us that closure. We've got DNA on the people that we've recovered. We need the DNA of their loved ones, and we cannot have enough of it. And it's only going to be used for identification purposes.
So tell me a little bit about the process. I know that the FBI is involved right now, but does the police department carry on these investigations forward, or is it another agency that handles it? How does that work?
So what we named this process that we created was called the MINT, the Morgue Identification Notification Task Force. When you use task force, it's when you have different assets combined. And so we combined MPD with the FBI, we have HPD with us as well. We had other federal agencies with us, both from the military as well as some other law enforcement components, to help build this task force. MPD is the lead on the missing person component. The FBI is the lead on using the analytics for the list, because right now it's exceeded MPD's bandwidth in order to do that. And so we made the ask, and they have graciously helped us with that. I had mentioned about the new number and the different things that they have, but they have 15 dedicated analysts just to take the calls and do that investigation. And so how fantastic that is. But MPD will be the lead as it moves forward, and our federal partners are augmenting and assisting us, and have really done a tremendous job to stand united.
You know, as the investigation moves forward and the area is cleared, many residents of the area are looking forward to the return to Lahaina phase. Is there a map of which zones will be cleared first, and is the police department involved with any portion of that?
So the county is putting together the reentry plan, and the county will be the lead on that. MPD's role is public safety and law enforcement, and so we may help with the perimeter, but as far as the plan and who's going to go in and what the zones are going to be, that's going to be led at the county. I know that the Deputy Managing Director, Josiah Nishida, is the lead for the county on this project, and it'll be coming through them. And so the numbers and the contact and all that information, they'll be pushing that. And it's really not a police role at all. We're a support function as far as the security component only, but really nothing else.
Information in the first hours and days of the event came much slower than many had hoped, and some say that created space for rumors and false information. Is there anything that needs to be addressed to set the record straight, to refute any issues surfacing on social media and the community?
You know, that's a great question. Obviously, in a vacuum, and when there's nothing going on, there's people that want to add to that noise or add to that narrative, and there is a lot of false narrative, and you know that needs to stop. You know, this nation fought a civil war, and the Capitol was never encroached upon, but because of false media, we saw what happened on January 6th, and because of false media, we have folks trying to spin some narratives that cops were either not doing everything they could, or firefighters were, or whatever that is. But our officers, just think about it this way, they're victims too. They lost their loved ones. They lost their loved ones. I got a cop working, I think he's working right now, and I know for a fact he lost his family members. He lost his home. And so while he's out there working, you think he's not doing everything he can to save his family? And so if you don't know the story, don't tell a false narrative. Don't spin something you don't know. The after action will come out. It'll show what people did. And what needs to take place is people need to really stop. And here's what I would say. Don't be a keyboard coward and sit there and just type in hate and false narratives. Go serve. Go help somebody. There's so many things that our people need right now. Go champion those causes. But we got people right now that are just struggling to get on, and they haven't even had a moment to grieve. We have people that haven't even stopped working since this has started, and they've lost loved ones. And so what I would say is there's a lot of great stories out there. There's a tremendous ability to talk about the spirit of the people of Maui and the people of Hawaii. That story will be the most incredible story when this is all said and done.
And as first responders being tasked with that mission of serving and protecting as well as preserving life, do you feel, just looking back at the incident and where we're at now, do you feel that the department carried this out?
Looking back now and knowing what I know, I can tell you that without a doubt, MPD, both sworn and unsworn, the men and women of this department and other first responders acted in the most admirable, professional way possible, period. They're heroes. They saved lives. Our people saved lives that day. They protected the community to the best of their ability. They stood in harm's way knowing their own loved ones were in danger, and they were doing everything they can to evac people out. There is nothing more that they could have done. We have countless heroes in this community. We also have folks, and I've heard that there are kids on motorcycles zipping up and down trying to get people to flee their houses. Let's not discount folks that acted heroically that normally don't. I would say this, not just on the 8th, but each day since, we've had people out of their comfort zones, and they're unsung heroes too. I could not be more proud of the men and women of this department than I am. We have folks in this community and on this department that unfortunately have now experienced the worst natural disaster as far as a wildfire anybody alive in this nation has ever seen. The experience and what they have and what they're going through is second to none. MPD, unfortunately, will have to lead and give back as other agencies experience these things too. But I'll tell you this, protect and serve, they did admirably. And they're undoubtedly some of the finest first responders in this nation and the world.
On that note, is there anything that you'd like to share that I didn't ask that you think it's important to convey to the public?
I think that the public and the community that we're privileged to serve, the support and love that they have shown this agency, the support and love they've shown this community, it's overwhelming. It's humbling. We are absolutely blessed and in awe of how much they have poured their aloha into us. And I am absolutely humbled to be able to be in this position, because I can tell you this agency is one of the finest law enforcement agencies in the world, and the men and women of this department are absolute heroes. Our moms and dads, our brothers and sisters, they are people that are of this community, and this community and this department are one, and we will be with them and they will be with us, not just now, but for always. And God bless them and God bless you.